One.
Hey everybody, it's Kelly and Ned Vandiver again,
Hey guys.
founders of the Relationship Loft, where we help people heal their relationships with themselves and with their partners so that they can have the love that they deserve in their lives, because that is what life is all about, right? Love. And so today we are going to be in part 2 of a 5-part series called The 5 Losing Strategies of Communication in Your Relationship. And today we're talking about number 2 of 5 losing strategies in relationships, which is called controlling your partner. And we're talking about this today because whenever one or some combination of these strategies takes hold in your relationship, you will never get what you want. And as common and as acceptable as they may be in our culture, they're completely dysfunctional and they're damaging to the marriage. And they're really part of an old paradigm and an old relationship model that is dying. To me, it's dead. It's that old relationship model of our parents and our grandparents that just, it doesn't work anymore, right? Because we are on an equal playing field now. Women and men, women are asking a lot more for men these days. And, men are really wanting to step up their game
And men are really having to step up their game.
yeah. And we're having to learn how to work together to create this love that we really desire and deserve, right?
And it takes some work now, because that old
Yeah.
paradigm was part of our culture for a very long time. And so now the ladies are showing up very differently, and the men are going to have to show up very differently too. They're going to make this work together.
Yeah. The women have to learn to speak up, and the men have to learn to step up
Yeah.
to the plate, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, and both of us learning how to work through this healing process together. So that's what we help people do. That's our life together. We're no different than any other couple, except I think we have a lot more kids than most people do. So that makes us different than most couples. And so, which means we have that much more challenge in our lives around the kid thing. But we're no different. We just learn how to navigate this path together in a way that we're able to stay connected. And that really is the key. So, all that being said, before we dive into this losing strategy and how it can look in your relationship when it shows up, I want to say this is that control is an illusion. It's a complete illusion. It's not real. You can't control anyone else. You really can't even fully control yourself. And when I say that, I mean, like, for instance, have you ever been sitting there just minding your own business, either sitting there or driving down the road or just wherever, and you just have a thought that pops across your head, and it's a crazy thought, and you're like, I don't like, that thought. You can't control your thoughts even,
Right.
and you can control your thinking and choose a different thought, but you can't control, right? Like, ultimately. Um, and so it's an illusion. So I just want to say that first. And I personally, one of my losing strategies in my profile in the past, not anymore, but in the past has been control. So I'm very familiar with this flavor of dysfunction in relationship. And with the losing strategy of control, really what's happening is, speaking from the feminine perspective, okay, is you want your partner to behave as they ought to. And look, a lot of men feel this way too, who have controlling behavior in their blueprint. But you want your partner to behave as you want them to, as you feel like they ought to. And that's controlling.
Right.
And the reason why this is so enticing to control is because in the beginning of a relationship, things are so great, right? And you're pursuing one another and you're getting to know one another, and then the wedding happens, and many times men will stop pursuing their women, and really the women stop pursuing the men, and because they feel not paid attention to, right? And again, this can happen on both sides. I'm just saying this is how it shows up a lot in our work that we do. And then once the pursuit stops and the level of polarity has really waned, the resentment begins to build, in silence. And what happens is you just want your partner back, and you want things to be back to the way they were in the beginning.
Right.
And, you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, the truth is you got with a person who has their own unhealed stuff that's never been addressed, and it's going to come out eventually. And that's really when the problems start.
Right.
And so Ned and I always like to say is, a marriage really doesn't begin until the problems begin.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what happens is when the problems start is that you just want things to go back to the way they were. And if it's in your blueprint to be controlling, control will kick in, and you'll do and say anything in your power to make everything be back the way that it was.
Right.
And you'll be working from that place of, oh, I just wish things were back here. But that's not ultimately where you want to be, right? Because ultimately you want to be moving forward, and you want to be getting better with time,
Right.
getting better with age, and growing together.
But I do want to say though, I know for many people who find themselves in this position, usually after you've been married for a while, people have a tendency to feel alone in this part of their journey, especially in relationship and marriage. And they think a lot of times that they're the only ones dealing with this type of stuff. And I want everyone to know that this is really common.
Yeah.
We are people, and we're very dynamic naturally, so we change. We change with time. We change with the advent of different things that become part of the relationship, like children. A change in career. Maybe someone gets sick. But there are many variables that come into play when we're talking about things that can affect us and put us in the position of wanting to be controlling of our partner when we feel out of control in our relationship.
Yeah.
And we naturally look a lot of times outside of ourselves. Again, this is what we do most naturally. And I think at times what we begin to do is, and this is why the old, the adaptive child part of us, or the dysfunction, kicks in, is when we feel a lack of control. We naturally revert back to that adaptive child response. And, as children, we know that when things are a little out of control and we don't quite have a handle on things, we look for ways not to have to blame ourselves. And so that naturally means when you're in a partnership or you're in a marriage and a relationship, we have a tendency to blame our partners. Okay. And that, and in doing so, this is why we're talking about this today, because we think what we're doing is helping the situation by getting our partners to either own our part a lot of times. If there's a problem in the way of finances or whatever it is, we have a tendency to, the predominant thought is our partner needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
And they need to be addressed. And so I want people to understand that that's really why we're talking about this. And we're just going to talk about the different ways that it shows up. But speaking specifically, for men, around control, it's been a natural part of our relational function because of the old paradigm, and so we a lot of men find themselves in this position very naturally, and wanting to take control over situations oftentimes because we don't feel a lot of control sometimes, and that's not very reassuring for us. And sometimes we lose sight of that, but we also begin to overstep our boundary in terms of exerting the type of control that we think is helpful for the relationship. But it also crosses the boundaries of our partner a lot of times, in terms of our actions. And that's what we're really, talking about today.
Yeah. And we'll get into some examples of that. I want to hear your take on that, honey, in terms of, speaking from the male perspective, how you feel you guys do that, right? Like how you feel like men overstep the boundaries a lot of times. So before we even get into what this looks like and sounds like when it shows up, I want to say first and foremost that control can look very different. Okay. Control can be very overt, in a person, and like slap you in the face as, really obvious and like very clear. And it can also be really covert and really sneaky, and can show up as being really passive aggressive and very manipulative.
Yeah.
And to me, that flavor of controlling behavior is just like even more deviant in a way
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, neither are okay, but yeah. So we'll be getting into, what that looks like. So let's move into what control can sound like. Control sounds like it's always this, being focused. It's you're focused on your partner. Again, we're talking about the old paradigm of, I want to control you. I want you to do what I say. I want you to do what I want, or there's going to be hell to pay if I don't get my way. And again, it can be very overt or it can be very covert. So it sounds something like this. I could be happy if only you, would do this for me or be this way towards me. If only you wouldn't do this, I could be happy.
Right. Or, if you really love me, you would do this.
Yeah.
Or be this
Totally.
way, or not be this way.
Right. If you really loved me, you would do this. And another way that it shows up and sounds like is telling your partner what they need to do.
Right.
You need to, what you really need to do is this. And, that's just bossy, right? Like, that's very controlling. That's very blatant. Like, you need to do this. That's like relationship 101. Okay. Don't tell your partner what they need to do. Like, I learned that like in my 20s. You know what I'm saying? So, like, if you don't know that, now you know.
Yeah, but a lot of people, we get into that mode of not really wanting to look at ourselves again, right?
Right.
So you notice that there are a lot of you statements.
Yeah.
The predominant, this is one of the dominating ways that this shows up, because, again, we put so much emphasis on our partners. You need to do this. If you would be this way, if you could only do this, this would happen.
Right.
There's no ownership in any of that.
Right.
Right. And,
yeah.
And that is very controlling. And we don't, like you said, the illusion is that this is going to help. The illusion is I'm doing this and I'm controlling the situation by having an influence on my partner in the way that I'm speaking directly and making them aware that they need to change.
Okay. Right. And the illusion and the thing about this is, and I think I posted about this yesterday on social in an email, that control's an illusion, right? And get this, if you're a controller, if you're a control freak, right? And you're trying to control the future, you're trying to control your partner, you're trying to control your kids, you're trying to control everything, right? You yourself are really actually being controlled by the illusion of control.
Right.
So you're like a puppet being controlled by something that's not even real, and it's a total illusion, and it's just a really unstable place to live your life from, that place. And it can cause a lot of issues,
Yeah.
psychological issues, a lot of damage. So how it shows up, I want to talk about how, because this is really interesting to me, but I understand why, and we can get into that too. But how this shows up typically in men versus women. Again, we are generalizing. This is how we see it show up most often. Again, this can go both ways.
Right.
Okay, but typically in men, men who are controlling, who have this in their blueprint, tend toward very direct controlling and bullying.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've experienced this in my life with men in my life. And so this is the way it is. They're just very grandiose about it, very overt, and it like will slap you in the face. Like,
Right.
you're doing this or else.
Right.
You better show up this way, or you better do this, or you better be this, or else. There's always a price to pay.
Yeah. The men have a tendency to treat their partners more like children.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. For the
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
And when they have this in their blueprint, when this is their losing strategy and it's part of their losing strategy profile, because again, everyone has a losing strategy profile. I mentioned that last week. I'll mention it again this week. Everyone has a losing strategy profile. So you may operate within one or two or three of these losing strategies.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how it shows up a lot with men.
Yeah.
And some women, okay? But in women, many times what we see in our work is that women who are controlling and have that in their blueprint tend towards this flavor of indirect manipulation and like benevolent anger. It's this like
Martyrdom.
yeah, and it's benevolent, and they really wear masks a lot of times,
Yeah.
as these good, wholesome, women just doing,
Who act like
they're
who act like they're actually tolerating a lot of
right,
stuff, but through the mask, right? They look like the victim, okay, but
right,
it's actually a tool that they use to control the situation.
correct.
Yeah, and
And
manipulate
it's
the situation.
very manipulative, very controlling, but it's done under the guise of I am this really, awesome person, awesome wife. I go to church. A lot of them use religion as a mask. We've seen that a whole lot. Um, and I am this great person, and I am a victim in this. So it's very victim-y type of control. And so and women have had to really take this route in getting what they want from their partners, because historically we haven't been allowed to, first of all, vocalize, use our voice, say how we feel, be honest, be open, because there were ramifications and consequences for that. So women
Right.
have been taught and trained to be very sneaky and manipulative with their wanting to get their way, right? And so, it's
That's when I was speaking earlier, and I was saying the old paradigm for men and women, we it has a direct influence a lot of times on how we respond to situations with each other, where we feel like we have to exert control.
right.
For men, they feel a natural um, entitlement a lot of times based on
Oh yeah.
to do that. Women, like you said, because they were somewhat powerless, had to learn how to find ways, and it looks deviant, But I mean, if you feel like you don't have control and you want to have influence, and you in your current situation, um, it's against you. In terms of you even being able to show up in that way, you will find ways. You have to look for ways naturally so that you can have a voice. So
Right.
yeah, and this again, we're talking about the old paradigm where women didn't have that type of control. They didn't have a voice. So it is a very natural part of the progression. To move into that position. But I also feel like this is where I was talking about the boundaries.
Right.
You have to have healthy boundaries in terms of your exerting um, your position, and also allowing your partner to do the same thing. Especially now.
Yeah, totally. So, no matter whether the control or your flavor of control or your partner's flavor of control is direct or indirect, no matter what kind it is, the bottom line is oppressing someone may lead to compliance for a short period of time and getting them to do what you want them to do, but it will never lead to a healthy, happy, joy-filled, mutually cherishing relationship with the one that you love. It will not. It will only cause more wall to be built up between the two of you, and a host of other stuff that just
Yeah,
isn't
long
healthy.
long term, it is a true detriment to the
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah,
That's,
because nobody likes to feel controlled. Nobody likes that. No human being likes to feel like their liberty is being taken away from them. And nobody likes to feel controlled. That's why tyranny never works, right? Like in the end, it just doesn't. And so, yeah, I just wanted to really give a visual of sort of the two different flavors of how it can show up, because it's not always this, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. You know what I'm saying? It can be much more sneaky.
yeah.
So another way this shows up a lot is, how do you see it show up?
Well, I see it if we're going to talk about the relationship between men and women, a lot of times, the emotional abuse. For a lot of women, they're dealt a very rotten hand in terms of dealing with the family a lot of times. When you have children, and there are a lot of stay-at-home moms who are I won't say they're put in a position, but in that position, a lot of men assume that, the women, it's not hard for them. It's not a difficult job to raise children and to be there for them and around them all day long. I find that to be really funny also, because it seems that when men who work away from home a lot and aren't around their children a lot, when they are around them, they feel the need to uh, and want to be somewhere else. So it's really funny to me that, and this is where we're talking about the emotional abuse, because dealing with children in that capacity and having to help steer them and guide them through their own emotions it can be a daunting task at times, especially if you have a number of children.
Right.
And I say that to say that doing it in a healthy way. We've been in positions where your emotions get the better part of you, and you may say something out of the way, yell or something at your child, but we know that's unhealthy. But showing up in ways that are healthy most of the time is challenging, and we have to have support in that way when we're raising children. Both men and women, we make the children together. There's a part we both have to play in that, in raising the child,
Yeah.
also in a healthy way. And so that's where I see it for the better part. The men really not showing up in the ways a lot of times that the woman requires his support, and
Yeah.
helping deal with the children a lot of times.
So when we're talking about emotional abuse, because most people would be like, what does emotional abuse have to do with control?
Yeah.
Right. And so specifically, we're talking about like For instance, for example, like gaslighting. Okay, gaslighting is a form of psychological, emotional control. So, and again, men and women both do this. And you see this in particular with different, some personality issues and personality styles out there. But we see this a lot, for example, and two, we're not just talking about women slash men who are like stay at home parents. We're talking about people who work full-time jobs. A lot of women we work with work full-time jobs, just like their husbands, make, just as much money, sometimes more, sometimes less, give or take. But they work just as many hours and they work just as hard.
Yeah.
And they're still expected to rear the children, raise the children, do the majority of the housework and all these things that's BS. And so, for instance, the kind of emotional abuse we're talking about is this sort of gaslighting, where, for example, a woman will approach her man, right? Like about wanting more help in the household. And this is just one instance, okay? It doesn't have to be about the kids, but we see this a lot. So, like, wanting your husband to come home right after work, right? Like when work is done, we come home, we raise the kids together, bath time, bedtime, dinner time, cleanup time, all this stuff. And women really wanting their husbands to be there and be present instead of him going out with his buddies, going to the bar, or staying at work late, or whatever excuse they have to not have to deal with what's going on at home. And instead of respecting the request, a lot of times, they'll turn it around on the wife. Okay. They'll get explosive, possibly. Sometimes they'll just withdraw altogether and ignore, which is another losing strategy we'll get into in this series. A lot of times, men will turn it around on the wife and call her controlling for her wanting him home, helping raise the kids that they made together, which is crazy to me. We'll just totally turn it around, rehash the past, and just becomes really emotionally abusive. And this is a form of grandiose control. It's very overt when you're a person who does this work and knows how to recognize these things, and making a woman feel like she's wrong. And
Right.
she'll literally start to question her reality and herself, like thinking that there's really something really very wrong with her. So this is what we're talking about when we say, emotional abuse, gaslighting. This shows up a lot as a control tactic in relationship.
Yeah. The next one I see that's pretty common is the tit for tat. And this all depends on your partner's fight or flight or triggered response to your controlling nature. But if one or both of you in the marriage are fighters or fixers, rest assured there will be some tit for tat, or what we call one upping, which is
right,
you know
trying to gain control.
yeah
Yeah.
calling one or another out. For example, there may be some commonality between the two of you where you both struggle with managing your finances. Okay, and collectively that can create an issue if both of you have a problem in that area, right? So what we have a tendency to do, let's say you have a financial issue come up, and again we're gonna point the finger. Naturally, that's what we do first, right? And so the other goes, yeah, but the last time something like this happened, you did this and I was doing like this, so I didn't have any part of what was going on. And rather than both of you being able to own your part within the scope of the problem, again we're going to go for, hey, I did this better than you this time, or the last time this happened, like you said, we make reference to the past thinking that's going to resolve some issue presently, and it doesn't work.
Right.
Just another form of how this shows up very badly when we're dealing with these types of situations.
Yeah. It sort of reminds me of, I feel like the tit for tat belongs really in the need to be right episode that we did last week. So I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah.
Because everything, overlaps to an
Yeah.
extent. Then the other way we see this show up a lot is just straight up manipulation of your partner, and really, trying to like force your position onto your partner.
Yeah.
And covertly, the way that this looks is just instead of being, and I see this all the time, okay, especially in women, because men tend to be a lot more direct,
Yeah.
just keep it real, keep it honest, keep it direct with a man. But a lot of times with women, especially, they're very covert in their manipulation. And instead of just being a straight shooter, and again, a lot of this goes back to, the fear that women have of being abandoned, of being left if they use their voice, and the retaliation that comes along with being honest and open. I know that for me in my life, I still struggle with keeping it real and being honest and using my voice with certain people in my life,
Yeah. I think a lot of
and
men struggle with that too. I think it shows up, especially a conscious person. We're always trying to figure out ways to say things, but sometimes it does lead to some covert action because, like you said, the frightening nature around some conversations, and being afraid to either hurt or the results of speaking truthfully.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for a woman, it can be a lot more covert, and instead of just being a straight shooter about what it is you want and vocalizing that, you try to get what you want by minimizing the discrepancy between what you want and what you have, by getting your partner to behave the way you want them to,
Mm.
by doing and saying things that a lot of times just don't make any sense because you're not being honest. And it's just it can be it's not direct, it's a very dysfunctional thing to do. And because a lot of times, for instance, I'll be working with a client, and she wants her husband to see her in this light. She wants her husband to give her attention and give her affection and give her love, and be interested in her. And instead of just like saying that very plainly, like, I want you to give me attention, I want affection, I want you to touch me, I want love, I want that. Instead of saying that, they go to these great lengths to pretend like that's not really what's going on, and then they'll make it about other stuff, and
Yeah.
it just gets very confusing. And
And the other.
it makes men really leery of women because they're like, why are you acting so weird? Because to a man, it's like, if you're not coming direct, they don't really understand. You know what I'm saying? And for a man, manipulation looks like, if you don't do this way, I'm out of here.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
if you don't do this way, I'm getting a lawyer.
Yeah.
If you don't do this way, and I'm tired of this, I'm about done. And it completely paralyzes a woman, makes her scared, puts her in fear a lot of times, especially if she's not grounded in who she is. And so that's the way manipulation can look. And again, it happens. Both men and women do both of these kinds of tactics. We're just saying this is how it shows up a lot of times in our experience.
Well, and then the reason why, though, for a lot of men and women, the manipulation is, the allure of control around manipulation is so compelling. For those who felt as children that they had no voice, or they didn't feel understood, or they just felt unincluded,
Right.
that's where this, it's why it begins to show up in this way, because again, we're seeking out something that we didn't get from our childhood. And in a way, it's almost are missing a skill in terms of like trying to learn how to vocalize and be honest about your feelings. It's like you have to find, again, this way to communicate or exert, your feelings or your emotions or whatever it is that you feel in a way that's not clear because you haven't learned how to do that.
Right.
And we're talking about, again, we always go back to why does this show up? How does it show up? And when we're on our dysfunction, the adaptive child part of us is the part that's really showing up.
Yeah. And we'll have to do another live on, in fact, I think it's on our editorial calendar, about talking about the adaptive child. What even is that? I know a lot of people ask us, what's that mean?
Yeah.
We'll do a live stream on that so you can understand the different parts of the psyche. Another way this shows up is, displacement of responsibility. Displaced responsibility. It's basically where you take the stuff that's yours to own in any of the tiffs that you have going on with your partner, because all married couples, and this is a known fact, they fight about the same couple things like forever. And it's just that it's the very stuff that needs to be healed within one another. And that's this important stuff to work through. So it's really where you take the stuff that's yours to own and heal, and you displace it onto your partner. So instead of healing yourself, doing the work on yourself, you try to heal or fix your partner. It's very controlling. And we see this a lot in big-hearted people too, who are healers. And it's like, no, boo, you need to fix you, not your partner, who want to fix and heal their partners and help them. And it's like, no, that is controlling. That is a form of covert control. And displaced responsibility, when it's done overtly, is just like, there's nothing wrong with me. This is you. This is all you.
Yeah.
This is not my fault. I didn't do any of this. This is all your fault.
Yeah.
There's no ownership, and it's very blatant.
Yeah. And the next way we see this is financial abuse.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah.
This is one that I've experienced in my life personally.
And this this one's pretty common, especially in relationships where I see a huge disadvantage, where the husband may make a lot more money than the wife, and they exert this control around the finances, where they really don't even allow their partner to have a say so.
Right.
Around how the money's spent, saved, invested, the myriad ways that it can the things you can do with money, their partner has no control whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. Or if it's not as overt like that, like I'm just going to completely dominate and control the money because I make the money. You know what I'm saying? I make the majority, so therefore I control it. I mean, that's very overt, right? But sometimes, again, men and women, but most of the time it's men, they'll have, the appearance of giving their partner a say and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's very, very controlling. And the other person really doesn't have a say. And if they try to speak up about it or ask for money or anything around money and the finances, they're berated, they're dismissed, they're treated like children, they're scolded, they're verbally abused. And I've seen that like a lot, and at its worst, where, especially if there is this situation where you may be in a really, the marriage is in crisis, maybe you're on the verge of splitting up or divorce or something like that, and someone goes and like clears out the account and takes all the money and takes it all and like cuts the other person off from the money in the marriage that you have accumulated together. That's happened to me before. And, that's happened to people in my life who I care about and that I love. And that is straight up financial abuse. So I always say this, like, ladies, especially if you feel like your marriage is in crisis, and I'm just saying this as a PSA, public service announcement, and things are getting bad, definitely start to look at protecting yourself financially. Have a document drawn up by an attorney so that if any kind of a split does happen, you and your partner have an agreement where you're protected financially and you're taken care of financially, especially if you've got kids. And be smart. Don't ever get to a place where you're up shit creek and there's no protection. So I just had to say that as an aside. So, these are several ways control can show up in relationship. There are plenty more, but these are the main ones that we see. And so how to fix this? What is the solution for this? And number one, if you're a person who suffers from controlling behavior, the first thing is you got to wake up to it. You got to own it, realize that you're in a partnership, and this is about being in a loving and mature and mutually cherishing marriage that's made up of two people who are living together every day, loving together every day, creating together every day. And it requires maturity and compassion and empathy for one another, and the ability to accept other points of view.
Right.
And control just doesn't have any place in that kind of dynamic.
You gotta get rid of the stinking thinking, in the relationship. And I know that's easier said than done, because you and I both know, we've been together for a while. We know situations can put you in a funk. The only way we know that you can get through that is to address your thoughts. Yeah, I mean, it's just important. You have to get out of this mode of where a lot of people find themselves spiraling is, they get one negative thought and then one turns into two turns into four. Next thing you know, they think the marriage sucks, but not the case. It's just you're in a situation where, it may be a little uncomfortable for a minute, but the only way you're really going to get through it is just like any other situation. You have to address the problem.
Which starts with yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And looking at, it starts here, and it starts with looking at your own patterns of behavior. It starts with looking at what we call your own flavor of dysfunction. And that's really the first place to start. So, number two, if you are with a person in the relationship dealing with a partner who suffers with control issues, you've got to create boundaries. You've got to begin to create boundaries for yourself and for your partner. You've got to start standing up for yourself. And when your partner deflects and projects and spews on you and is manipulative, you have to stand up. And also, another key thing to do is, and this is so hard, is to not personalize it and take it personal, and realize that these entrenched patterns are not about you. You've got your own stuff, but this is about them. So as hard as it is, take my word for it. Don't internalize it and realize that this problem is theirs.
Yeah.
So when the threats begin and when the manipulation begins and they're in their own flavor of dysfunction, take it for what it is. If you can find any truth in it, awesome. If you can't find any truth in it, completely reject it and then put the boundaries in place, and then stay in your own lane and deal with your own personal issues that you've never dealt with, and or healed from the past, because it's really likely that if you're in a dysfunctional relationship, or you're just out of a string of dysfunctional relationships and you just can't seem to find a person who has the emotional maturity or availability to be in a relationship, it's likely that you've never dealt with your issues from
Right.
childhood, and you really need to. If you ever have a prayer of getting into the relationship that you really want and you deserve. So you've got to start to really be introspective. You got to start asking yourself different questions.
Yeah.
That's so key. Start asking yourself different questions. So when you find yourself in the negative mind spins, get grounded, meditate, start deep breathing, take a pause, get into your body, and really start to ask yourself different questions that are going to get you different results.
Right.
And then own fully, how you've been showing up in your marriage. If you're the controller, if you have control in your blueprint and you've been showing up this way, rest assured that your partner is just like, oh my God, I
Done.
can't stand
Done.
this,
Right.
in that case, if there's been a lot of damage done and there's a lot of resentment and there's years that have gone by, you're really going to have to own fully how you've been showing up in your marriage.
And
Totally.
they're going to have to understand that you fully are aware of how you've been showing up too.
Right. They have
Yeah.
to know from your words and from your feeling, your emotion, and back of
Yeah.
your words, they have to feel that you really understand how they've been feeling. That's so key. That's so key. And you've got to take radical responsibility for your growth, right? You've got to get the skills that are required. You've got to, get the support, get the help, hire a coach, hire a mentor, because the marriage of today requires a whole new set of skills that 99.9% of people just don't have. They don't know, because the reality is we were not taught these things by our parents and our grandparents. They had a very different dynamic and a very different model that they lived by, and it just doesn't work anymore. So you have to attain the skill set, just like any other part of your life and your professional life. You've got to continually be honing your skills. Your marriage is no different. And we say that all the time. So,
Yeah, the awareness is just one piece of it. It's a very important piece, but it's just a small piece because then you have to begin to make shifts, right? And
yeah,
we know fully well that most of us don't know how to do that healthfully and effectively. So this is
yeah,
why it's
totally.
important to reach out, get the proper help, ask the right questions, talk to the right people,
Mm,
get the right answers.
yeah, totally. The right help is so key.
Yeah.
Because look, what got you here to this point in your life, in your marriage, is not going to get you to where you ultimately want to be in your
Right.
marriage. Because if your marriage is in a place that's sucky, that does not feel good to you, and you could have figured out how to change that and transform that, you would have figured out a way already.
Right.
So if you don't have the skill set and you feel like you're living in a perpetual cycle of what I call communication Fdom, then it's time that you get outside help. And so if if this has resonated with you, if you are ready to do the healing work, if you are looking for help, if you're just looking for some clarity in how to fix this and get to the other side of some really hard stuff in marriage, this is what we do every day, all day, in our own relationship and with our clients. I invite you to book a call with us. It's a discovery call. You'll be able to book that online with a link that we post in the comments underneath this video. You can also reach us at the Relationship Loft at our office, and you can call us. And the number is 678-721-4244. So you can call us directly and book a discovery call that way. And on these discovery calls, really what we're doing is we're getting to know you. We do these calls locally with our clients that live near us in our local area, and we also work with people all over the country and abroad as well. So these calls are for us to, again, get to know you, really figure out what are the issues, the pressing issues at hand that really need to be dealt with. And if we feel like 1,000% we can help you, we will let you know how exactly we can help you. If we feel like we can't help you with what you've got going on in particular, we will give you the resources and the clarity about how to move forward and what the next steps would be for you. Because everyone's on a different, part of their journey,
Yeah.
and they need different stuff. And our wheelhouse is healing, is relational communication with one another, and relational skills, and relationship transformation with yourself and your partner. But if that's not, what a person needs, and they need something else first, we will send them in that direction, because we're very well connected and have a host of people that we send clients to all the time. So, do you have anything to add?
No, yeah, I do. I wanted to also make people aware of that. If you know someone who's dealing with an issue,
Yes, I forgot to say that.
yeah, make sure you share this with them, because there are lots of people who are sitting quietly, hurting, and not getting the help they want because they are ashamed, or frightened,
Yeah.
don't want anyone to know that they're having issues. So,
Yes.
yeah, if you feel like there's a friend or in need or someone, please share this video with them also, because
Yes.
a lot of people out there who need help.
Yeah. Share this video, like this video, screenshot, send it to whoever you think needs it. And because if you resonate with it and you found some value in it, it's likely your friends and family are going to like it and find value in it also. So please do share. And we're here to help people through their suffering and get to the other side of it. And we hope to see you on the next episode, where we'll be going over the third losing strategy. And we'll talk to you guys and see you guys soon. Thanks
Bye,
for
guys.
tuning in. Bye.